Stewart here out in the Spanish wilderness doing some smartphone filmmaking today. I've pulled off some shots with lovely motion blur thanks to this ND filter, so I want to give you a little rundown about how to use one of these so you can make up your own mind whether to go to the trouble of getting one and pursuing that beautiful motion blur. ND filters enable us to lower the shutter speed when shooting video on our smartphones to a level that gives us motion blur the eye is accustomed to seeing when watching cinematic footage. Normally when we're setting an exposure on a camera we have three levers to pull: the shutter speed, the aperture and the ISO. If we take those in reverse, you've probably heard keep the ISO as low as possible to reduce the amount of noise and grain in your footage. In a smartphone that might be 32, on a normal camera it'll be something like ISO 100. As for the aperture, well, the aperture is fixed on a smartphone, so we don't really have any control of that, which leaves us with the third lever that we can pull to set a decent exposure, and that is the shutter speed. You may have heard of the 180-degree rule, whereby we double the frame rate we're shooting at to calculate the shutter speed that we need for that lovely motion blur. So a real-time frame rate of 24 or 25 frames per second, we need 1/50th of a second shutter speed, give or take. Now, even with your ISO all the way down as low as it will go, and mindful that you have a fixed aperture, on a bright sunny day the shutter speed is going to be something like 1/2000th of a second to get a balanced exposure like the one we have here. And this is where your fourth lever for controlling exposure comes in: the neutral density filter, an opaque piece of glass that you stick over your lens to cut down the amount of light getting to your sensor. This here is a clip-on ND filter from Newer. We have no link to the company, we just like their products and it's cheap and affordable stuff. You literally clip it on. Now this is a variable ND filter, so you can change the opacity of the glass by twisting the element if you like. And it does a pretty good job of blocking light getting to the sensor. One thing to note is that you'll in all likelihood need a third-party camera app to control your video settings manually when filming on your smartphone. It can be intimidating, but it's really not. It's super easy. So do stick around on the channel and we'll teach you all of that. Before you even go down that route, ask yourself the question, do you even need motion blur? Do you want it? There's no right or wrong answer to that question. Personally, yes, we do like motion blur. We love the way it makes the footage look genuinely more cinematic. That is what the eye is accustomed to seeing when watching high-end cinema, and that is the look that we are going for. We need that for our clients as and when we do client work, and we just want it for the aesthetics. It pleases us. However, not everyone agrees with that or sees the value necessarily in motion blur. So if you're not interested in that, then you don't need to bother with all of this. The other issue to address before we go to the trouble of clipping ND filters onto our phones is to think about whether there's actually any motion to blur. Think about it, the clue is in the title, motion blur. If there's no motion, there's nothing to blur, so it's not going to make any difference whether you have an ND filter on or not. So if you have fast moving subjects, then absolutely I'd recommend the use of an ND filter. Or if your camera's moving fast, that creates a lot of motion around the periphery of the frame. You're going to want to use ND filters. But to be honest with you, for a headshot like this, you probably wouldn't notice if I wasn't using an ND filter. Now, out of instinct, I am using an ND filter, it's just something that we do. If I happen to want to wave my hands like this, you will notice the difference. Let's put a freeze frame up. Yes, you can see that there is motion blur around my fingertips. It looks more cinematic and professional. But if you understand the difference between shots with motion and shots without motion, then on a run and gun basis, which is kind of what a lot of smartphone filming is, then you have the choice to just ditch the ND filter, quickly grab the camera, get that shot, knowing that it's not going to impair the outcome because you didn't bother to put the ND filter on. So to be honest with you, there's not a whole lot more to say on the subject of ND filters. Sometimes there's a bit of confusion. People think it gives them better colours in their picture. They're probably confusing them with polarizers, which may or may not do that. It doesn't really allow you to point your camera at the sun and give you nice balanced exposure. In fact, it doesn't allow you to do that at all. All it is an opaque sheet of glass that helps you control your exposure to get your shutter speed down, to give you the motion blur the eye's accustomed to seeing when watching cinematic footage. If you want some help with the apps to give you full manual control of your shutter, then do check out our pretty extensive and exhaustive comparison of 8 premium mobile filmmaking apps. You can find one in there for $2.99 that will get the job done. It's really not that complicated, and stick around, as I say, on the channel for more assistance there. We also have a comparison chart that you can get a link to below. Download that to assist you on your journey. Anyway, I wanted to make this one a quick one. I'm going to get out of here, see if I can get some nice sunset shots. Had a lovely day. Hope you've had a lovely day too, and we will see you next time.